Welcome to this video where I'm going to go over a little bit about our table build, some of the design choices that we made, and hopefully a few things that will help you along the way as you make your own edits to this design and some changes. So first thing, important thing to note about our table is a 7-foot by 4-foot table on the outside. So kind of edge to edge, side to side. For us, that worked really well, but that can be an odd size for a table. A lot of times tables are 6 foot by 4 foot. For us, we wanted a little bit more space in our inner dimension. We wanted this to end up being 6 feet by 3 feet on the inside play space here. So we made ours just a little bit bigger and we had the space for it. So just note that you might be going ahead and taking off a foot here, and you can do that in kind of a couple different ways. But just know that, that was the dimensions of our table that we were working with. For us, one of the really important things that we wanted to do was we didn't want to have square corners. So we added this kind of face plate here along the edge that ended up having kind of two angles to it. So it's a little bit softer of a cut here. For us, basically, that meant that we just took the edges here and we took a 6-inch by 6-inch triangle basically out of the corner. Now note that Tinkercad does not do extremely large files, so everything here is 1/10 scale. So that 0.6 is actually 6 inches. So that's one important thing to note as you are going through this. Now I've kind of marked some of the different inches here to kind of show what we did. Now, when you are making your cuts, even if you do as much as you possibly can to make sure that you're doing your cuts correctly, you will probably end up with 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch gaps if you end up just doing things straight by a cut list and then trying to assemble everything. So for us, it was really important that we went through, and every time we made a cut, we measured the exact space that was left so that we knew exactly how wide these pieces needed to be, and we would make those little bit of adjustments accordingly. Take off that little bit of a saw blade cut if you needed to each time, give that fence a little bit of a tap. So just know that as you are building, these are kind of your goal measurements, but you might have to do measuring as you go. So for our design, what we ended up with is on the side, we have 2 player stations that are each 20 inches wide. We have this 6-inch wide piece. Now this is solid for us. This was kind of glued down, so this piece does not move. Same with this 12-inch piece here in the center and this 6-inch piece here on the side. Along the top, this 12-inch piece is glued in. This center 20-inch piece is glued in. And this other 12-inch side piece is glued in as well. So that gives us some very solid pieces of the table that do not move. And if you wanted to, there's actually kind of little pockets in here if you were really interested in adding some electrical to your table. If you wanted to have some outlets, charging ports, things like that, these little cubbies here on the side would actually be probably pretty good places to do that. And then maybe you'd run your wiring underneath the table. Or you can kind of wire, along the edges here. It just depends on what you want to do with that. For us, electric wasn't really that important. So we went ahead and we did scrap that for our build. So here we have our 20-inch player stations. Now, what's important to note here is that these don't necessarily showcase exactly what they are. So this 20-inch piece here is actually what's showing here with this light blue piece that's all the way down. So when it's folded down, you don't have this piece along the top here. When it's folded up, say like this one's folded up, the yellow piece is the folded up piece. And then this is actually a faceplate that kind of folds away. So when you have your player stations folded up, it's the top, and then the bottom, of course, stays put. And then you would have a hole that's there. Now, you might not mind the hole. for us, we wanted to go ahead and make some face plates, and we're actually going to magnetize these and attach them to where the hinges are so that these pieces just kind of magnet right on and are easy to take off. And then actually under our table, we have this brace here that actually acts as a little bit of a storage space. So these face plates come and they sit down here in under table storage. So that might not be important to you, but I just wanted to explain that in the design, kind of exactly what these pieces were here. So for us, these are solid faceplates that are actually CNC'd. It doesn't have the window there. I just use that so you can kind of see through it to kind of see what is in there. And then as you're building your hinges, I have a separate thing to kind of showcase the hinges. What's really important is that this height here is exactly the same as this height here. Now you might cut yours on a little bit of an angle here and here as well so that, you know, this isn't square, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. The square one will work just fine. But what is really, really important, your hinge is going to be attached across the two pieces here. But what's really important is that when these two match up, that the bottom of your table, for us that was plywood, and this piece here end up being exactly the same so that you have a nice smooth writing surface. So another important thing to note for this build is going to be some of the heights. Now these took a lot of finagling for us to get just right. Our player stations are exactly 11 inches deep. And so that allows for a sheet of paper, kind of, you know, vertical sheet of paper, just a normal piece of paper. But if you start making changes to some of these distances here, that kind of starts to change. So for us, these outside pieces here are 6.5 inches tall. So that actually goes from the bottom of the plywood to the very top of these rail pieces is 6.5 inches high. For us, all of our material was 3/4 of an inch thick. So again, that's kind of what we're going to be basing everything off of, is that 3/4 of an inch thickness. These pieces were only 5.625 inches deep here. And what that actually allowed for, if you can see it, is a little bit of a lip. So these vertical pieces here that run on the inside, these are some of our big stabilizer pieces, right? A lot of things are actually glued to these. These really help to keep everything where they should be. And when those player stations fold up, there is a little bit of a lip here. And then this piece is solid. And again, you have this lip. And that is for our table leaves. We wanted to make sure we had a little bit of a lip so that our table leaves could easily kind of just slide into place here and not have to find some other way that those were held up. So, so that's why we ended up with that 5.625, very specific width here. And that is basically because we wanted to make sure we had that little bit of a lip. Then over here, these rail pieces along the inside, these are only 5 inches deep. Now, for us, we needed that amount of depth because of the TV box that we ended up putting inside of our vault here. So you may not need something quite this deep. So you know, can maybe do that as 3 inches or 2 inches. Maybe you really don't want anything, you know, much more than map and maybe the height of your miniatures or whatever game it is that you like to play the most. And you want to be able to put something on top of that. So 5 inches is quite deep. For us, we needed that because of our television box that we had built. So we built that television box first, and then we went and we kind of designed around that TV box. So those are some of the dimensions that we ended up using. One thing I want to show you over here is this corner piece. Now, if you were to make a regular corner, that is, if it were to come all the way out here and here, you would end up making 45-degree miter cuts right here in order for these two pieces to come together. But because we cut a little piece across the side here, you're going to end up needing 22.5-inch miter cuts in order for these pieces to kind of all fit together. So that was one thing. And definitely when you are doing these cuts on the corners, I would definitely make sure that you make some scrap cuts and then try it later, on your real pieces. So do your scrap cuts first, make sure everything fits the way it's supposed to. Again, this was an area where we strictly measured this distance from here to here. And we didn't just kind of go with, the exact length that Tinkercad told us. We really measured this, and we slowly snuck up on this piece and these as well. Now, for our cup holders over here, we did these as 4 inches wide, and the faceplate on these is exactly as wide as the cup holder itself. So our cup holder designs are exactly 4 inches wide. On the ends over here, we ended up doing 5.5 inches wide because of some of these miter cuts. So we wanted to make sure that our cup holder didn't run into anything kind of in the back here. So we made it just a little bit wider so that that cup holder kind of sits in the center. So this faceplate is just a little bit wider, and it did cut down the space on this player station a little bit as well. So this player station was 25 inches side to side. So that's our DM space, and then whoever sits opposite the DM on the long side of the table. Or if you have to put two people kind of on the end of your table here, they can kind of share this 25-inch space between the two of them. So that was basically kind of our main design. And we spent a ton of time on this, really tweaking these numbers in particular, this height and the width here and the height here, and making sure that our player space was exactly the size we wanted it to be, and with as short as we could possibly get away with here. Because we didn't want people to have to reach a really far distance in to be able to reach something in that player space. So we wanted to make sure this inner vault area had as much as it possibly could, and then we still wanted to make sure we could get that full sheet of paper here. Definitely really important for us. Another couple things to note on the legs. So our legs we ended up doing out of plywood because that's what we had on hand. We didn't have enough hardwood to be able to do hardwood legs. So for us, we ended up actually gluing 3 pieces of plywood together. Now this purple piece here is actually 2 separate pieces. We cut these all out on the CNC. And I think I rounded these corners a little bit as well. I didn't make those as sharp a corners. And so these 2 purple pieces, these are actually separate, 2 separate pieces here. And it kind of like makes a little hug. It's kind of like a little slot where each one can kind of be one extra deep in. So they kind of do this little bit of an overlap, but not a full overlap. So we have kind of one board that sticks out that is kind of solid all the way down on both the inside and the outside. And then again, for us, we did the stabilizer piece between the two. Definitely really important if you're going to do anything like this style of legs, that you have that stabilizer piece that really helps these to be nice and stable. We had to put wheels on ours. It was really important for one person to be able to move that table for us. It's a very large table and pretty heavy too. So we went ahead and we put it on wheels. So when you are looking at the height of your legs, be very sure that your player space height, however this ends up, right, the top of this surface here, is going to be your writing surface height for the chairs that you have. This table is designed for the height of our chairs, which may be very different from the height of your chairs. So we took a lot of care to make sure that this right here was a comfortable height so that you could write on it very easily. So just a note when you are doing your legs, for us, we had to take into account the height of the wheels that we were going to buy and things like that. So be cautious with the legs, and there are tons of table leg designs you can do. I don't think this is really that imperative to the design of this table. I think this is just something that we wanted to do and give a try, and we ended up liking it. So that is the basics of the table itself. So go ahead and feel free to download a copy of this and make changes, move things around, take things off, move them around, do whatever you need to do to be able to kind of see the table and how you really want to design it. Hopefully this can just kind of be a base for you and how you're thinking about designing things. Another thing that we don't show in here in this design, but we did add in is we added in actually a lot of kind of square support pieces here. So just things that glued along the back, down across the bottom, and then we could rest these pieces on and attach the faceplates to. So we ended up having a lot of kind of hidden pieces, in some of these cubbies that you don't necessarily see, that just added a little bit of structural integrity, and just one more piece of glue so we knew everything was solid. So the next thing I want to take a look at is these 4-inch cup holders that we have here. And same thing with these 5.5. These are just the face plates. So these plates that are right here, just go ahead and get glued onto the front of my cup holder designs. So this here is the cup holder, and this is the back. So basically when you pull this out, this back piece will actually get caught against, we glued a little tiny piece of wood there so that as you slid out, this would basically get stuck and wouldn't be able to go back any further. This used a lot of wood, and it is a lot of layers, and it is a lot of gluing. So you have your base piece here, and then we glued a solid piece on top of that. We've got our back piece that we glued, and then we have these 6 separate kind of, bridge looking pieces that we glued that kind of made us the shape of a cup with a little coffee cup mug outlet, if you will, there to be able to grab those. This is a ton of gluing. This looks very rustic. That was the look we were going for. So if you want a rustic look, by all means, give these a go. If you've got another idea for a different kind of cup holder you want to buy or design, I think that's a great way to go too. We're really happy with these, so I wanted to go ahead and share them. Also in this design is the pieces for the hinge. And you can see here that there's this kind of cutout. And this I made specifically for the hinges that we purchased. And the reason I did that is when this comes up here and this folds on top of here, we wanted to make sure that all of the metal for the hinge didn't interrupt this laying flat up here, because this piece kind of comes and it rotates, as you are folding it up, and it will sit on top of here. Sorry. Kind of like that. And so if these two pieces, if I hadn't allowed room for my hinge here, this piece would actually end up sticking up a little bit. And then the top of your table wouldn't be flush with the pieces next to it, because this is what actually the top of the table sits on top of, is this piece here. So it was really important for that to work for me. So I went ahead and I did a ton of measuring and designing, and I was able to kind of come up with what that hinge looked like when it was out completely flat. And so I went ahead and I just kind of cut that out with a few geometric shapes there to make sure that there was room for that hinge. Now, you could do this without making these types of cuts, and you could just kind of go on this side and you could cut out through here, whatever space you needed for that hinge to kind of fit flush with your angled cut here. So that's totally up to you. These are here. If you have access to a CNC, fantastic. That's going to make those a lot easier than trying to do these by hand. But you could definitely do some things by hand to give yourself space. You can use a router, Dremel. You could use chisels to give yourself some extra space here. So there's definitely lots of options for cutting out to make sure that you have space for your hinge. And again, same with this piece, right? If you are using traditional hand tools and you are using, maybe you just have a table saw, these are going to be really difficult to cut out. And so I would definitely suggest coming up with kind of an alternative to this if you don't want to go that CNC route. You might be able to find something. Maybe you could cut these pieces out and then find, a cup holder that you can glue onto it. There are things like that. So go crazy. So these are definitely some of the designs that having the CNC machine made it a lot easier to kind of do the final pieces. And then the last thing I want to show are the face plates. Now, I have not provided the models for all of the face plates. And the reason I haven't done that is that I did not want to I didn't want to give away some of these models. So some of the models that I've used for the faceplates on the final table were paid models. And so I didn't feel like it was really right of me to, give those away. So the file that I have provided does have this, uh, back plate, and it has this frame here. That's something that I just created, and it makes a nice little effect, a little frame for the outside. It's pretty simple. But if you do have a CNC machine, basically this is what I did was I just laid out my different designs here, and then I went ahead and I uploaded those into the CNC program as a 3D model, and basically cut these out using the CNC. So if you want, you can use my model, which again just has the back and the frame. But I wanted to see you to see these just so you could kind of get a feel for what I had done, what I had designed, how those were created. Because all of the CNC faceplates, I actually did design these in Tinkercad. Now it was a lot of pulling in other files. Some of these definitely are free files that I did pull in and use. But like I said, some of them were also ended up being paid models and things like that. So all of the faceplates, these just happen to be the ones with the drinks. So these are the cup holder faceplates, is this one. But all of our faceplates around the whole table were all done with the CNC and designed in Tinkercad. So I hope that gave you a little bit of a good overall understanding of some of the things that went into our design process before we even did a single cut. For us, it was so important to be able to get this part of it right and to get this part of it looking the way that we wanted it to look and make sure all of our measurements worked before we actually made our first cut of wood. So thanks for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day.